So I happen to have a lot of toys and things that I keep around my classroom just in case we might want to draw them. You also might want to grab tools like scissors, markers, tape, pretty much anything you might find around your home or your classroom. And I like to put them on a tray on my table and to encourage students to pick out um, two of these items. Usually it has to be an animal and then something else. So I've got like a turtle here, a blowfish, snake, all kinds of random things. And I'm going to go ahead and do this for my project here. I think I'm going to put these two aside and I'm going to go with my turtle and this dice here. And they are going to work perfectly for my metamorphic art project. Now, the goal of this project is to have my turtle turn into my dice. And I'm going to use these 4 pieces of paper to show that transformation. Now, my favorite way to approach this is to just get one of the 2 items. I think I'm going to start with my turtle and decide how I want to portray it on this piece of paper. So am I going to do it horizontally like this, or maybe I'm going to do it vertically like this? Maybe I'm going to do it from the top like this. I want to find the best angle, and I think I'm going to go horizontal with this one. So I got to kind of hold my turtle with one hand and kind of sketch it out with the other. So we'll see if I can do this here. And I'm going to use my pencil to very lightly sketch the main shapes of my animal. So in this case, I'm just using ovals and circles to very lightly, I repeat, lightly sketch out the main shapes of my turtle. And I'm going to try to use up a good amount of space on my paper so it's not too teeny tiny, right? We want to get it nice and large so that it uses up that space. And I'm just going to go in and just very lightly put in the details of this turtle to the point where I have it solid enough that I can go ahead and use my pencil a little bit harder now to start sketching out the actual details here so that you can see them. So by starting with these basic shapes, that helps make my drawing a little bit more accurate. I can look at size relationships like the head size to the body and things like that. Now this turtle is a very forgiving subject because it is kind of cartoony. So if I do draw something that's a little bit off, maybe I make the head larger than what it actually is, it's not a big deal. And you could try doing this in a cartoony way as well. Maybe you're looking at a real animal toy that looks realistic, but maybe you want to draw it in a cartoon sense, and that is okay as well. I'm trying to kind of sketch out the portions of my turtle here, working on little fins. I'm going to add the shell. You can see I've changed a couple things here and there, but overall it's got the main feel of the turtle. I did make the head a little bit larger, makes it a little bit more cartoony, and that's okay. Making the shell maybe a little bit taller. I'm going to kind of sketch that out so I have a nice little turtle picture here to work from. I'm also going to add a little tail at the back. And my turtle has some flowers on its shell, so I could go ahead and do some flower type shapes, even though real sea turtles do not have flowers on their shell. I'm embracing the flower power and adding some flowers to my turtle shell as well. All right, so I got my main turtle sketch done. I'm liking how it's looking. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my dice. Now, instead of just making my dice straight on, I thought it would be a little bit more interesting to do it kind of in 3D at a little bit of an angle. So I'm going to try to hold it at an angle and draw it at that angle at the same time. I'm working with slightly diagonal lines to show that it's coming down towards me, and then trying to make it kind of so that you can see part of the top of the dice as well, like so. So I'm trying to use up that whole paper again. I'm starting off with just the real basic shapes, and then I can add details like how these corners of this dice are actually kind of smoothed over. They're not sharp corners. So I'm going to draw that in as I draw my dice here. And then I'm also going to sketch in just real lightly the dots for the numbers on the dice. And I think I actually want to make it a little bit longer here. I feel like it's not quite long enough, so I'm going to just adjust that quick before I do the numbers. There we go. And I can bring this dot down a little bit and do my 3 on this side here. And I will erase my line on the bottom that is extra and get my dice kind of in there nice and neatly. Got a nice white eraser I can use, so I'm going to erase that, and now you can see I've got my dice represented on my paper. I draw real lightly with the pencil until I'm sure of where my lines are going to go, and then I can push harder, or I can even add marker. And I think I'm actually going to go ahead and do this, and I'll come back after I have Sharpied over my 2 designs. All right, so this is my starting point. This is my finishing point. I'm starting with my turtle, I'm finishing with my dice. I've got 2 more cards here, and you can do more than 2 if you would like. But now I need to show how the turtle is going to turn into the dice. And this is where it's kind of fun. You can get a little bit creative. You can use your imagination and say, okay, what would I do on this one here, for example, where it looks more like a turtle but less like a dice, and you can see it start to kind of transform or morph into the next object. So maybe my shell's not going to be quite as rounded. Maybe my eye is going to get a little bit bigger and turn into one of the dots of the dice. I'm not going to have as much detail of showing where my legs are, because it does need to turn into a cube. And my tail's just going to poke out, but maybe it's going to be a little bit more rounded. I do want to show a little bit of a line where the shell is, but maybe that line can turn into the line of the dice. And maybe my legs are actually going to turn into dots on the dice. So I'm trying to think, okay, how can this transform into a dice picture? Notice my flowers are turning into circles because I need those to be the circles of the dice, and I'm kind of liking that. So it looks more like a turtle. You can definitely see turtles still, and less like a dice, but you can see it starting to transform. Now on this one, I want it to look more like a dice and less like a turtle, but not quite all the way there yet. So it's gotten a lot more similar to the shape here of the dice. I still have a little bit of a bump for the head, and maybe the dots are starting to move into the right place, but they're not quite there yet. And maybe my turtle shell is kind of moved up like this to try to be the top part of the dice, but my dots aren't quite where they're supposed to be yet. So you can see maybe it was a turtle at one point, but now it's looking more like a dice. So those 2 are looking good. Maybe I'll indicate there was a little tail there at one point, and I'm going to go ahead and Sharpie these as well. All right. So now you can see my steps. I've got step number 1, and I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 on my card. Step number 2, step number 3, and step number 4. And I'm really liking how they look, and I'm thinking they are about ready to add some color. So not only did the shapes transform one into another, but we can also play around with the colors a little bit as well. Now I kind of went easy on this one because my turtle is green, my dice is green, so there's not a lot of color transformation needed. However, I will kind of play around with the shades of green, and that can kind of help be part of the transition as well. My turtle also has some pink flowers on the top, and so those of course will not be represented on the dice. They'll turn from pink into white. So I have a color transformation going on as well as a shape transformation for this project. Now I am coloring with something called Neo crayons. These are basically colors that work like crayons, and then when I add watercolor or water to them, they look more like watercolor. But you can really add or color with whatever you would like, whether it be colored pencils or crayons or markers even, to make it work with your picture. But I'm going to go ahead and start kind of doing some of my dark greens first, and even my dark green shell here will need to transform into a lighter color. So for example, my top two here, number 1 and number 2 steps, are going to have that dark green for the shell, but maybe my number 3 will have the dark green starting to turn into a lighter green because the dice is completely like a yellow-green color. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a little bit of green on the top of this dice here, but then I'm also going to blend some yellow with it to keep it lighter. So as you are coloring, think of ways that you can get the colors to transform as well. Have that be part of the metamorphosis. So I'm going to go ahead and continue working on this so you get the idea, and we'll show you what it looks like after I have done some more work on the colors. All right, there you have it. So now I have colored in completely these different parts of each one. You can see the colors kind of transform from one into the next to give that overall effect. And when I'm done with this project, I like to usually display it up and down like this. So I have the top one, and then underneath step 2, and then step 3, and then step 4. I think that works out really well for displaying these. If you have vertical pieces, you could always do them sideways as well. So that's kind of a fun way to show that. Hope you enjoyed this project. Let me know how it goes, and thanks so much for watching.